Alrighty, I'd like to welcome this morning Ronnie Tiffany-Kinder. Ronnie is a former elementary school teacher with the Department of Education and a current teacher educator at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and she's a very good friend of mine. And today she would be sharing with us the COVID classroom, teaching and learning from home during a pandemic. Thank you so much and welcome, Ronnie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I talked with Joyce a little bit about today, and hopefully it'll address some of your questions and actually give us opportunity to explore some of those questions. And so we're talking about the COVID classroom, not to teach about COVID, but teaching within that context, because our students, our children, are no longer going to their schools, so our homes have become their classrooms. We've taken on roles of teacher, and at the same time, for many of us, trying to balance those roles and work. And if you have more than one student or child, then even more complicated. So today what I wanted to do is start with some introductions and what I call in my education courses getting grounded, grounding ourselves into who we are, what we bring to this space, and what our outcomes, our desired outcomes are for ourselves as well as for the program itself. We're going to talk about how to structure the homeschool day. And it's interesting that I know this is the word that we so often use, but homeschooling has taken on a new phrase in my mind and my work. Homeschooling is something that occurs in tandem with in-school when our schools are open, but now homeschool has taken on a whole different meaning given our current circumstances. We're going to talk about how to organize your environment, and this could be for any type of environment. I work with students and parents who are anything from still living in our dorms to living in small apartments or studios, living with multiple people, living alone, or living in larger spaces, but just not quite sure how to manage that. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about self-care, self-care for ourselves and our keiki, and give you an opportunity to share your best practices. And then at the end, we'll do some Q&A. So I wanted to start today, first of all, welcome, mahalo to all of you, and thank you so much, Joyce, for this opportunity today. Wanted to just kind of take a deep dive and introduce ourselves. So I'll begin using this audio, and then we'll use our chat box today off and on to help share ideas and not be too invasive in our space, but at least for me to know who is out there and where you come from. So as Joyce said, my name is Ronnie, and I have been a teacher for almost 30 years. I started off in higher ed and high school, and then I was a elementary school teacher in the Hawaii DOE for many years, up until 2013. And then at that time I shifted and I went to UH Manoa as a teacher educator. I was not a teacher who left my job frustrated, angry, and overwhelmed. Actually, I left crying, uncertain that I was doing the right thing. I loved it very much, but needed just an opportunity for growth. I'm a grandmother and a mother, so I've raised children, but here's the thing, here's what I've not done. I have not done what all of you are doing. I have not had to homeschool my child in the time of a pandemic. So I come to this within a very limited context. I understand how to work with children, how to organize space, how to weave self-care into our practice. But what I don't have is the experience you bring, which is why at the end, if you have any best practices to share, I would like to open up the field to that, because there's no way I can truly understand what it feels like. Also, the other disclaimer, I only have one child, and I spoke with a friend who has 5 children, and she was expecting many of them to be very busy teens over this past month, and they've been all home, and 5 boys, by the way, and so I think it's been a little rough. So in terms of introductions in our chat box, if you could, I'm going to ask you to put your name, and I'll put in mine so you can kind of see your institution or department. And I work in Institute for Teacher Education, elementary, and I am an instructor, or coordinator. And I put that in the chat box. So if you could take a moment to do the same, then I can kind of get a feel for who's in our room. And by the way, if you would like to do this with audio instead, if you're not hands-free at the time, you can also unmute your mic, excuse me, and do that. About that. As you're going through the chat, it's so interesting to see that we all come from different areas on campus, from different walks of life, but I think also our paths often cross. Joyce and I realized early in our relationship that we actually know the same person who I went to high school with actually a million years ago, and she also knows her too. And I didn't go to high school in Hawaii, so it's a little different.
I
Okay,
think
thank
a
you.
lot of people know her, so we can mention it was
Oh, okay.
that
Anku.
everybody knows. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Anku and I went to
interesting.
high
Small
school
world.
together. She went to elementary school with my husband, and we have been friends since we were 14 years old, 40 years now. And we stay in touch all the time. She's doing great. We just played ukulele together over the internet recently. Okay, so thank you so much for sharing. It's great to see that we have people from all different areas. And I think to myself, that must be a challenge for you, because so many of you are doing the kind of work that I would imagine you're working in your own workspace on campus, and then to be home and having to navigate things with your children, a little bit more challenging. So the next thing is, as I had told Joyce, I wanted this to be an interactive session. And so Joyce is going to be monitoring our chat box. And if you have questions along the way, if you could please put them in the chat box, or by all means, you can also unmute and ask using audio. And then I'll pause every now and then for Joyce to share what those questions are, so we can address them as we roll out. But I'll be sure to pause and go back to the chat box, and then Joyce will monitor. The other thing about being interactive is I like to get to know a little bit about, for you to get to know a little bit about who you are and where you're going in terms of this work. And so I've prepared a couple kind of getting ready for each other type of activities. Okay, so the first one is I'm going to ask you to do an anonymous survey. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that into the chat box. It's using SurveyMonkey, and I'm just going to ask if you could go through the survey according to SurveyMonkey. It should take 2 minutes, and it's going to look something like this. And it's just to kind of get a feel of what you folks are facing at home in terms of working with children and homeschooling a keiki. And you can interpret some of these questions as you wish. The other thing is, afterwards, when you're done with that, we're gonna do a little bit of a self-assessment. And while you're doing that, I'll take a look at the survey. So let's start with the survey first. So let me put it in the chat box. And this is also new to me, by the way, doing things quite this way. So I'm hoping it'll work. And then there you go. So if you click on that survey, there's just about 6 or 7 questions. And let's see where it takes us. I'll give you a couple minutes. I'll check back with you in 3 minutes, see how that goes.
Ronnie, I don't see the survey in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. It accidentally went to just one person. Sorry. There you go. Thank you so much.
Survey monkey.
We'll come back in just about a minute.
Ronnie,
Yes.
I'm having difficulty copying and pasting that into a thing, and it doesn't go straight to the link.
It doesn't?
No, I don't know about other people, but yeah, I'm having some difficulty doing that.
Okay, let me do some check-in.
Thank
I
you.
yeah, I see.
Oh, okay. Somebody said right click on it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, select all. Okay, okay, got it.
Thank you.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, and I'm on a Mac, so I
oh,
think sometimes that makes a difference.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I don't know what happened with Zoom, because before I could just put the link in the chat box and it would show up as a hyperlink, and about Thursday it stopped doing that and I did nothing differently. I don't know what happened. Don't know why this keeps, and I don't know, I have a, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move on, and I'm gonna take a look at those survey results in just a little bit. But the other thing I wanted to do is have you do kind of some self-reflection. Now, this is something that's not going to be sent to me. This is only for your purposes. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put, again, a link, which I apologize, I hope it works. I'm copying it as a hyperlink, but for some reason, it's not coming in there. I'm going to try one thing a little differently and see if this helps. No, it's not going to help. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and type in a hyperlink. And I apologize for technical difficulties. So what I wanted to do is have you do a little bit of self-reflection or self-assessment, however you want to look at it, thinking about how you feel about working at home, either with your actual child or if you were kind of asked to work with a child if you don't have one right now. I know some of you said it wasn't applicable, regarding working at home during a pandemic. And so what I did is I created this Google Doc for you, and it should open, if you go to the link, it will say to make a copy. And then you can make a copy for yourself and then go through each prompt and either highlight agree or disagree. So that's option A. The other option is you can just look at the screen as is, because all the prompts are actually there. And then you could just write on a piece of paper, option B, or you could just think about it. You don't actually have to do anything. So you can just take a look. So this is just a moment for us to get grounded and figure out kind of where we're starting so that we can assess how much we've gained over the next 40 minutes or so. So I'll give you a few minutes to take a look at that, and please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, and just doing a quick temperature check. If you click on the participants icon on your screen, you can indicate, yes, I'm ready to move on, or no, I am not. Okay, so far it looks like people are about ready to move on. So I'm going to keep chatting, and then we'll see how it goes. So thank you so much for doing the poll earlier on SurveyMonkey. It really helps me to kind of get a feel of where everybody is, and I can see we have such a wide range of experiences going on in this space. And so one of the things I was doing over the last couple weeks is thinking about what are people saying about homeschooling during COVID-19, with a disclaimer that what you see on the internet is not always what's real life. But I was looking at some of the tweets that were out there. And so if you can see one dad, and it's interesting, I noticed a lot of them were for dads. I only have a few. If you see my boys locked outside, mind your business, we're having a fire drill. Homeschooling is just standing behind your kid checking their math on your phone calculator. And if you notice the dates of both of these, it's kind of early on in this homeschooling process. And then 2 weeks into homeschooling, my 9-year-old has already broken the world record for the longest amount of time spent sharpening a pencil. I had to laugh at that one because that is so the elementary school teacher's dilemma. And then homeschooling update day 2. So this was March 24th, helped 6-year-old with telling the time. For instance, how there are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 245,934,992 hours in 2 days of homeschooling. So this is just representative of, there was this website that had 40 tweets about homeschooling during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I thought these are really funny. But I also have seen, and I'm sure you have, like memes all over the place about homeschooling. And so one of the things that I've been talking about with teachers, my student teachers, friends and family, are ways that you can rearrange your day so that it's a little less stressful. And so I'm thinking about, granted, I only had one child and I have one grandchild, but I've spent years teaching 30 kids at one time. So I kind of have a little bit of a feel on how to manage them, but again, never in my own home. So one of the suggestions or tips is to structure your day. And so having some sort of schedule posted is really helpful. For those of you who have multiple children, you might have to have different schedules. So this is actually someone's schedule, and she didn't want me to use it because she spelled recess wrong, but those are our real world homeschool problems. And so this is for one child. And this family arranged the schedule on purpose for the time that best matched their family life, the energy level of the child, and what would work best for them. So one of the things that I was explaining to Joyce is you don't necessarily have to have the full day scheduled. This child had it scheduled till 3:30, but having some sort of schedule brings a predictability and structure and reliability to a child's day. They're used to being in a classroom where the teacher posts the daily schedule. You know, from 8 to 9 we're doing this, 9 to 10 we're doing that. And having been a classroom teacher, heaven forbid I did not update the schedule. So if the kids came in on Tuesday and Monday's schedule was still posted, immediately they would say something. And granted, this is also breeding a lot of you know, predictability and a structure, maybe too much structure, but they liked knowing what was going on, because if they saw assembly or special event, then they would ask about that. So having a schedule helps. And again, the other thing about a schedule is if you have 4 children, it helps to schedule who gets to be on the computer when, rather than it being a free-for-all of who is the loudest or who woke up first. Now that schedule may have to alter depending on need. So what if you have a high school age child who's trying to finish an assignment that's due the next day and it's very intense, versus maybe an elementary school age child who has the week to do their iReady. So you know, changing the schedule every day is helpful. When you have uncertainty and the kids don't know what's happening, it could definitely breed discontent. They could be a little bit of pushback, because you might say, well, we're going to do math right now. Well, they didn't know they were going to do math, and so they were unprepared for that. So having the schedule, even engaging them in creating the schedule, is super helpful. And again, it helps to manage time. So for example, if you have 4 children and you need to work with all 4, you can schedule in who you're working with when. Now, just so you know, I'm not like a big schedule person myself. I tend to do things holistically, but when I spell it out in a way that I can see it, it's helpful. Now, this particular person had a chalkboard, and in fact, I have one as well. She gave it to me, a little chalkboard I can put in my screen, that I put my schedule on as well. But you don't have to do that, and those are from like the dollar section or the discount section of Target. Little chalkboards are great because they can be erased. Whiteboards, Post-its, even just having a Post-its, or just scratch paper. I think one of the parents that I worked with essentially just took scratch paper, put it on a binder clip, stuck a nail in the wall, and hung it up, and would write up a schedule every day. So it doesn't need to be anything elaborate. In fact, I would recommend you use whatever's around your house, because I think for one, it's good practice for the kids to see you do that, but it also would eliminate you having to go to the store. So a home schedule is very important. So I'm going to take a pause there in case you have questions, comments, or suggestions, and then we'll continue moving on. The one thing that I didn't ask is whether, if you have school-age children, K to 12 at home, whether they have live face-to-face time with their teachers. So that might be something you would put in a different color, because that's something that you need to have. It's kind of locked in. There's no flexibility with that. Some schools, I've noticed there's a huge difference. Some schools will just lay out some sort of assignments at the beginning of the week, and it's done asynchronously, so the kids just do it on their own time. The other thing is that some schools will have live time. You also have children who work independently. I would encourage these kids to actually create their own schedules. If they're working independently, that's one way they could do that, or even a to-do list. So that's what Post-its are like. These are the 4 things I'm doing today, and you peel those Post-its off as they're done, and then it's done. There's actually a ton of research about the satisfaction of having checked things off or having a schedule and mentally going through it. And just so you know, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. This is just something that I noticed in my own work, but I conferred with a therapist about all of this just to make sure I wasn't saying anything that was just bonkers. The other tip is creating a dedicated workspace for you and your child. So I think the 2 things are very important. I know from our Survey Monkey that some of the kids have dedicated workspace, and I think that's super important. It doesn't have to be anything super elaborate either. So like this child's at the end of the dining table. I know for a fact the child has a desk in his own room, but there was this desire by the mother not to separate or isolate him from what was going on in the home, and wanted him outside where she could see and also where he could talk to her. But sometimes just having that dedicate, like this chair on this dining table. So in this child's case, this is actually the chair that his dad usually sits in at dinner. And so that's the dedicated space. I have spoken with another parent who had a signed jersey, a football jersey from Marcus Mariota, and they would slip it over the back of the chair during school time. So that kind of indicated, okay, now it's school time and it's time to work. So creating a space, you want to create a space that values learning. So versus having something that's sort of on top of other things. Now, that's not to say it needs to be a completely cleared off brand new desk. Quite frankly, it could be a cardboard box sitting in front of a couch. That's a dedicated workspace. It doesn't have to be anything new or fancy, but sometimes having like a little carrying cart or something with a cup of pens or pencils, even just having some books stacked or with bookends kind of gives a space of, wow, look at me. Think about people in offices. Think about, these funny sitcoms you have. There's a difference between the cubicle worker and the one that has the office. And so when kids feel like they have this office space, that they are so important and learning is so important that I made it just for them, they love it. So thinking of the elementary school, kids love it when they run into the classroom for the first time and they see their nameplate sitting on their desk. And so a lot of times kids will want nameplates at home. That's another thought. For high school students, their sense of space for working might be very different. They actually may prefer just to sit in a chair or lay on the couch. As long as this is a space that when you're there, this is work time. This is not like a Nintendo Switch time. And so I think dedicating that space when I'm there, this is the action I expect to see in that space, is super helpful. It also gives the learner a sense of importance, that I am so important that someone made this space for me. So thinking about my classroom experience, like in preschool, the kids love to have this one little area where they're doing certain things like centers. And I think it's because it's that sense of importance. So one of the kids that I talked to right before actually the pandemic, I said to him, wow, you have such a special place for your learning. This is a special needs child, and he needed to be separate from the rest of the group. And he said, well, special things happen in special places. And I don't know if like someone kept telling him that or if he really believed that. So I think that having a designated space is important. There are a lot of people who live in multi-family settings, multi-generational settings, have many children. And so it can, you got to kind of gear your kids. Is this a designated space where all 4 of them are sitting at the same table? Or maybe 2 and 2, or separate and separate? Which actually kind of brings me around back to that scheduling part. There are some of you who have multiple children at home. You can schedule group work where these 2 kids are going to work together on that, and these 2 kids are going to work together on that. So my friend with the many children, many sons, she has 1 son, doesn't like to work with anybody. So she facilitates the group work. For the most part, the 5 work independently, but she pairs them up. Same thing with spaces. They can actually have office mates where they're sitting together and working together, conferring with each other, you know, build that into the schedule, do some check-ins with a family partner, let them know, give them an oral thing of how you're doing, how are you feeling, what are you thinking, what's going on. So those oral check-ins. So I think opening those communication lines and communication spaces is really, really important. It's also important that you consider your own workspace. So I find, especially for some of our parents who work in academic settings like the university um, setting, we oftentimes will put our needs to the side and we'll put our children's needs first. And I actually didn't make that up. I read that. It talked about the more academic setting the parent is, the more less likely they are to try to replicate that at home. And so, but I'd like you to consider your workspace and try to personalize it. Again, it need not be anything fancy. It could be something simple. It's less the tangible part and more the internal part. And so I'm sure we've all heard of Marie Kondo and how it sparks joy. Find things that spark joy, even if it's just, you know, like a little simple pencil case like this, or a picture, or artwork or a pen. How you organize your personal space is going to give you a sense of comfort, and that sense of comfort kind of becomes infectious with the children. I was telling Joy, even just putting up little like twinkle lights like in that picture can sometimes just add a completely different energy. So if you go on like Pinterest or even just Google Images, and there are whole blogs and workspaces that, I mean, I actually follow blogs that has different types of workspaces. For some people, the workspace in this picture would drive them nuts. It's too sparse. The picture was taken in the evening, obviously. Maybe it's too dark, but other people really want to have like books everywhere. So this virtual background I have is from a movie, actually a Disney movie. And so this workspace is a lot more full, but it gave this person comfort. So my suggestion is to work with what you have. You know, even taking, you know, the elementary school teacher makes something out of nothing. Taking cereal boxes, milk cartons, plastic containers, tofu trays, all of these things can be turned into amazing organizational things, because you want your workspace to give you a sense of comfort. You want to know that when you're there, because you're going to have to be there for a while, you want to be comfortable. But I highly recommend you work with what you have. I think that some of the things I read was talking about people who go on Pinterest and try to replicate what they see on Pinterest, and it just becomes very stressful because it doesn't look anything like that. This particular picture is of an office. It's actually my office, but for years I lived in a studio with a 5-year-old. My workspace was literally a corner at the bottom of my bed. So I think that there are many, this is our creative time. And I think it's good for our kids to see, this is my workspace. So when I'm sitting here, you need to just give me this space and give me some time. And I think that those visual boundaries help. So I'm going to take a pause, make sure that I'm not kind of barreling through this. I am mindful of time. Okay. But if you have questions, just chime in. Okay. So our kids are at home. Teachers are sending iReady, KidBiz, AR, all these things, and it's making us bonkers. And I hear it all the time. And so I think when I talked to Joyce about today, I asked her, are we looking at what to teach, or are we looking at like our own sense of comfort and manageability? So we kind of went for the latter. But sometimes knowing what to teach and how to teach really helps. So I have something that I call the extended core. So in DOE talk, our core is our English language arts, our math, our science, our social studies. Our extended core are things like art, music, PE, health, language, those kinds of things. So when you're working with the kids, my recommendation is try to engage their senses. So in the picture that's on my left, I hope it's your left, you might see a kid standing in front of a TV with a dinosaur. Okay, so that image is actually being projected using mom's iPhone, and that is a virtual museum tour of the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. The mother of this child was less interested in this because she's like, all you do is walk through it. They don't talk to you or anything. But the kid was out of this world engaged. I loved walking through the museum. She was shocked at how much he knew about these dinosaurs because she just knows dinosaur. And I think there are many virtual museum tours online. So all these things I'm talking about over the next few minutes, I'm going to send a resource list to Joyce, and maybe Joyce, you could pass it on to other people of resources, things you can do at home with your kid. But this was amazing, and I think the Smithsonian has lots of these virtual museum tours. This kid is not real interested in artwork, so although children's art museums have the most, not interested in that. He doesn't want to see art, he wants to do art, which is the picture on the right. So this art and nature experiences was coupling science and art. They went out into, they're on the Big Island, and they went out and did some bird watching. And I think they used an app where you could actually try to take the picture of the bird and it would identify it, but they couldn't get close enough to do that. Reminding child science is not always about success. They also went out and used another app where you could take a picture of a plant and then it tells you what the plant is. And then after exploring their own backyard, this is their backyard, they did some painting. And then after the painting was done, the attempt was to write a poem about the painting, but child was less interested in that, but very interested in the painting. And so art and nature experiences and virtual tours really help to engage the kids. One thing that I didn't put up here, I didn't have a picture of it, is something, I believe it's called Go Noodle. I have to double check. So Go Noodle, you know, TikTok is all the rage right now, but Go Noodle is like kind of the opposite of TikTok. They're doing the dance and the kids kind of follow along, but there's an academic slant to it. And so I've noticed teachers use Go Noodle with kids in the same way that long ago they used to use Brain Gym. So for example, Brain Gym is a research-based practice where you have kids do certain movements like this, and it actually gets their brain going. So the idea of the Jane Fonda aerobics back in the 70s, was it 80s? This is kind of Brain Gym. And Go Noodle is the teacher puts on this video and the kids dance, and there's usually some academic thing to it. But it's a way to do physical movement. They have kids Zumba on kids yoga on YouTube. Don't forget PE. PE is very, very important when doing the art and the experiences. So you want to have that multi-sensory experience. So this particular child is very visual, very creative, doesn't like to do the next one, which is more kind of sit and write. And so journal writing is something, I think it says, would you rather be a pirate or a jungle explorer? And he was doing creative writing, and he said he'd rather be a jungle explorer because you can find new birds and pirates don't brush their teeth. But they're also doing some writing in their journal, and a lot of parents are, just about this pandemic. This is a good time to do family journaling. You know, thinking of the date we went on state lockdown on March 23rd or 24th, and how things have kind of rolled out since then. And I was talking with my teacher educators in class right around, I don't know, the first week of the pandemic. We were on Zoom, and I was telling them about what it was like to be a teacher on 9/11. And even though now, in retrospect, we know how those events played out, and that happened on a day and it didn't come back another day. But at the time, we didn't know that. We didn't know what was coming. And what I had my kids do in my 5th grade class is had them write letters to themselves about how they were feeling that day and what had happened. And I never read them. They wrote it to themselves, they stuck it in an envelope, and I gave it to their parents, and I told their parents to please give it to them on the day they graduate from high school. And I taught in a community where we all keep in touch, and sure enough, they did. And I think having a journal or some sort of record of what you're doing as a family would be really great. It need not be words. It could be pictures. It could be remnants of things you collect, prints of emails or screenshots that you experience. But I think that the journaling could be a family record of what we're doing today, and hopefully this is never going to be replicated. Um, Another thing is, don't forget about scientific inquiry. Mother and child, mom does not like to get up in the morning, so she just drinks her coffee, and they do scientific inquiry, where I think they were doing hypotheses of what would happen if you stuck an egg in vinegar for a week. And they were doing a little research, and then they did the experiment, and it turned into rubber, bouncy rubber egg. Scientific inquiry, there are lots of different websites and YouTube videos, the kids love those, about scientific inquiry, but you want to couple it with questioning, like, what do you think is creating that rocket to go? Why is it not flying higher than 30 feet? What could they do differently? That's always a great question. And so asking them the whys behind things, having them build a rain gauge, why would we use a rain gauge, who uses rain gauges, etc. Although when I asked this child that, he said Guy Huggy uses rain gauge. So I think it's really important to have multiple experiences. Now, I understand that the teachers are providing learning, and if that's filling your day and that's it, that's great. I think that's good. But if you notice kids are getting antsy, maybe taking, even if they're doing iReady, having them talk about it afterwards. Okay, we're going to do iReady, lead up to it, ask them questions about it, have them teach you about it. Try to change it so there's a little bit more variety in how they're experiencing these learnings with each other. Okay, I'm trying to keep track of time. Okay, important, schedule breaks, work, play, and have fun. It is really important to have downtime. Downtime definitely matters. Kids are used to morning snack breaks and maybe even afternoon snack breaks in school. Schedule them. Schedule that morning snack break. If the kid starts at 7, tell them, 9 o'clock, you've been working hard, but let's stop and let's take a break. Have a scheduled lunchtime. In fact, one of the tweets I saw was the homeschool lunch schedule is like mac and cheese, mac and cheese, mac and cheese. And so having that scheduled lunchtime, and you don't have to sit and have lunch with the child. You can just let them have lunch, give them some downtime, and that's your time. Finish, and my recommendation is to finish when the kids' school day finishes. They have this internal clock, and they know that school's done at 2. I questioned the parent who had the 3:30 schedule, and there was a rhyme and reason behind that. And also, she also wanted me to share that in spite of all that I'm saying regarding schedules and structures, to give yourselves space to say, not today. Today, we're going to take a break and we're going to just do something else. That you don't have to have perfection. This is just a guide, but there should be some flexibility. So I think about traveling, like when I travel, I do have kind of an idea of where I'm going, but I want to have enough space that I can find new space. And sometimes you're just spent and you just don't want to do it that day. And I think you should definitely give yourselves downtime, but preface that with a conversation with the child. I know we've been working hard this week, but today we're going to take a break. So, or maybe you only schedule school Monday through Thursday, take Fridays off. But for the most part, kids need that break. Take them out, have them do something else. And you too, you need a break. Which leads me to the next part, and the final part is, don't forget to celebrate and practice self-care. So at the end of each day, if only for 5 minutes, I highly recommend that you celebrate what happened during the day. It could be something that, it doesn't have to be where life stops and you have this big meeting. You could be getting ready for dinner. You could be, making a cup of coffee and just turn and say, hey, let's talk for a few minutes. What did you accomplish today? What goals do you have for tomorrow or someday? Having this closure helps children to feel successful. And I think about my teacher candidates, and I tell them, please don't do as I say, not as I do. I was the teacher who freaked out and like, oh my gosh, it's 2 o'clock, we gotta go. But I found on the days where I actually brought closure to my day and to my lesson, everybody was happier. Kids were happier. I was happier. They went to A+ without beating each other up. Having kind of that 5 minutes a day just to talk and gratitude time, you know, like, thank you for, I know it was a rough day. Thank you for trying your hardest, or wow, we did so much great things today. And don't forget to self-care. You've got to nourish to flourish. Don't forget to take time, even if it's, again, that 5 minutes, to just relax. And so for me, mine is, I am not a morning person, but I get up in the morning and spend like 10 minutes just reading, having a cup of coffee, or walking around in my yard. But I don't check my email right away. I don't start working right away, but I take a moment, whether if it's a hot bath, a glass of wine, cup of coffee, Netflix, YouTube videos, TikTok, whatever it is. But I think that taking time for yourself is critical, and whatever self-care means to you. So with that said, I'd like to open up the floor. I know many of you may not want to speak, or you can chat or just reflect. Do you have any best practices that you find have been working for you? Okay, well, we can keep that thought, but if something comes up, please again know that I have not been doing what you do. I've been kind of the wingman of many, but I've never had to be the lead. And so I'm not necessarily, I don't have the context that you do. And so if you have something that works or doesn't work, please let me know. So for example, one thing that it could be a best practice is getting out of the pajamas. Now this could be a lousy practice for some people, but for some people, getting up, getting dressed, and not staying in the same clothes helps to shift from being at home to being at work and school. But for others, there might be comfort in that. So it's good to reflect on all of those things, what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And so if you have questions, please, I mean, no one's asked anything just yet, but remember, you can always contact me after the fact. But I wanted to open the floor. If you have questions, or Joyce, is there something you would like me to touch upon that I haven't brought up? And I will definitely share some resources. I could, you know, like what you can use at home for all of this. I'll put together a Google Doc of some sort.
We have a lot of people here that are really awesome, and they have children. So I was hoping that somebody here would share with us just one thing that they do right now.
I can share a little bit of what.
Great, thank you.
So I actually have 4 kids. From my youngest is 5 to my oldest is 13. And what we kind of do, and it's also complicated because I also work during the day. So, I mean, I work from home, but I'm on a lot of meetings and things. So it was a little challenging, but what we do that has been working is we do a schedule, but it's more of a flexible schedule. So from this time to this time, it's study or learning time. And then there's a list of things that are acceptable learning time activities, which is, you know, doing their homework, reading, coloring, those kinds of things. And then it's also helped that for a set amount of time, that buddy system, or that working together, where my oldest will help the younger one with some of his homework. And that's been really helpful, where, you know, they are working independently, but then they can also kind of take on that responsibility of helping each other out. And that's been working really well for us, scheduling wise.
Thank you, Trina. You touched on something that I haven't mentioned, and I've had people tell me that it's successful practice, is that flexibility. And so some parents have found a choice board helps. And so whether it's one child or multiple children, they might have, like, you can choose to do so the one who showed it to me, it was like a big board and it had Post-its. And these are the 6 things you can choose from. Choose one now, and then they would pull it off the board, put it at their workspace, and I'm going to work on reading to myself right now. And then, or it might be, I'm going to take a break right now. So they had a choice board so that it wasn't so much a schedule, and it wasn't even a to-do list, but it gave the children autonomy. She said she did the choice board because once that choice was pulled, that no other kid can choose it, because that allowed her to diversify. And then, like you, she also had buddy time. So as a buddy, they would go and pull a choice. But the choice board really helped. And she couldn't create a schedule with her kids ranged from kindergarten through a senior in high school. And it was just too hard. So thank you, Trina, for that. Is there anybody else who has a practice that you've tried at home or that you've heard of?
Hi, this is Regina. So I have 4 children, one in college, she's 21. The other one is just laid off and he's 19. The other 2 are 4 and 1. So with all the different age groups that we have to deal with and having to make sure that everyone stays on some type of schedule, the key is, like you said, flexibility. Trying to accommodate everyone from my husband and myself's meetings that we have to attend to throughout the day, maybe even having to leave to go to the actual office, to making sure that the kids are learning virtually. Like my 4-year-old who is special needs, we actually deal with special education a lot. So IEPs, work plans, Zooming with the teachers a lot, WebEx. We do pretty much everything within this past month that I thought almost wasn't possible, but they send home work plans. We try to follow it as close as possible to their day, I think is what's key. Like you said, sticking to the school schedule, like ending by 2, because if not, the child will probably get exhausted and frustrated if you push them a little bit too much. But I honestly agree with all of you. Flexibility is key because every child is different in how they learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I love the message about flexibility. And it's not just for our kids or for ourselves. I mean, by Thursday, we might have just had such a really, really rough day. And so by Thursday, we might have to bring it down a notch. And especially when you're working from home. I don't have that magic answer, but I like to listen to how other people are managing, especially those who maybe had family members like a mom or dad come in help with the kids and now they cannot. So reading your own self is, like you said, there are many different needs of children, but also our own needs, or maybe, you live with a loved one that you've not really spent enough time with, instead of taking a break, a flexibility break for that too. Also, I was talking with Joyce about what I hadn't thought about, and this is kind of a recent conversation. So I have a colleague who has I think she's going to be a junior in high school, and then 2 older children who are away at college. And those kids were not supposed to, like, they were going to stay away at college and do whatever it is they do. But because of pandemic, they came home earlier, and they're intending to stay here to go finish college. So the high school girl is a little bit, I'm not disappointed. Her idea was it was going to be just her and mom's a widow, and dad recently passed away. And so she thought it would be just the 2 of them. But now that the 2 sisters are coming home, she's being a little bit, difficult, I guess you could say. And so that dynamic of our adult children, I think, can also be a challenge because they have some autonomy and independence, but they're still our kids. And so that there could be tension and just trying to manage. And like you were saying, you have adult children and then 2 little children, actually. And the stresses our adult children experience, being laid off or having to change schools, I think listening to ourselves and to our kids is very helpful in that way. I know our time is almost up, and so I just wanted to share with you that on the end of the Google Doc that I had posted earlier, there is an after today's workshop prompts. And this is, like I said, not for you to share with anyone but yourself, but it's about, do you agree or disagree with where you are now, or what you think you could be doing differently in order to change kind of the energy and dynamic. And so I invite all of you to return to that doc and kind of reassess where you are now. And like I said, I'll leave that here. So in case you don't really want to go to the doc, you can always just look at the prompts that are on the screen. And then I'm going to leave my contact information showing. Oh, sorry, I'll go back to that just in case. Sorry, my bad. And if you have anything you'd like to add while we're doing this, please chime in.
I did have one more thing. This is Trina again. The other thing is that helps a lot for myself is prep time. So, you know, on Sunday, I usually take about 20 minutes to half an hour to make sure that, you know, with the kids scheduling and having it up available for them to see, and trying to make it so that they are independent as possible, so that it helps us throughout the day and therefore throughout the week. If I take that little bit of extra prep time so that we're not trying to figure it out, you know, through the day and stuff like that, it makes a big difference on how smoothly the day goes by.
That's such a great idea. And can I ask, is prep time, do you find it a good evening activity like the evening before? Or is it a morning thing?
I usually do it the evening before, usually after the kids go to bed, you know, is when I kind of take some time to just prep for the next day. That works for me, because usually in our mornings, you know, my kids get up early and stuff, so we usually start our morning bright and early. So for me, it helps to do it the night before.
Wow, that's such a great idea. And in many ways, that's almost time for yourself. That's a self-care time for yourself, even though you're doing things for the kids, you know, whether you've got, you know, a movie playing that you really want to watch, or music playing, or just, you know, after a nice shower, just somehow make it so that it is kind of a downtime. I think that's great. It's a good idea. Well, I know it's 10 o'clock and I want to be honor that time. So I've left my contact information there. I will send some thoughts about virtual museums, some resources, and some online PE or science. Those are the three things that I've been looking at the most. And then if you have questions, you can always email myself or Joyce, who can contact me as well. But mahalo for giving me this time, and best of luck to all of you as we go through what looks like another month of working on this.
Thank you, Ronnie. And everyone, I'll be sending out a survey evaluation as well as the resources from Ronnie. So please look for it and complete the evaluation. Thank you for attending.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Thanks, Joyce. See you later. Talk to you soon.